Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. And today we want to talk about base building, and this is in general, which means for each army which is out there and which is kind of popular. I mean, there are so many different armies out there, but I want to give you like a brief sneak peek of how to counter each single army. And this is working for pretty much any town hall level where the troop is existing. For example, if I say, okay, this is how you counter bats. Obviously, you can't really build against bad spells on Town Hall 8 or something because there aren't even bad spells for Town Hall 8. So if you keep this in mind, then those tips and tricks are pretty much for every single Town Hall level, even though I'm showing this on a Town 12 base. Keep that in mind. This is super important. As well, I will give you guys this base in the comments, like as a link, because I used this a couple of seasons ago in Legend League and like one season ago, and it worked pretty well. And I can show you a couple of things in this base on, well, how to do base building and at the same time how to not do base building, because I had some mistakes in this one as well. So that's always, a thing that you can't really defend pretty much any army in the game. So we'll talk about electro dragons, hawk riders, lalo, which means how to counter loons and balloons, because that's different, how to counter miners, pekkas smash, electro, or overall suey attacks, which means if you have like your king and queen trying to get as much value as possible, and you as a base builder, you try to deny that. Those are the main things you want to talk about. Oh, and one last thing, the bad spell in the end as well, which means how to defend against that, what should you keep in mind for that, etc. So the first thing we want to talk about is the electro dragon. The electro dragon is super powerful if there are storages, for example, inside of your base, or overall a lot of buildings with high HP buildings, with like high HP, and you can bounce really nicely over them. Which means, for example, we have those storages on the outside, and we have those expos in the inside, in the inside of the base. Which means on the outside, the storages can't like. First off, we have to understand the electro dragons, how the bounces work, because then we can talk about the high HP buildings and why they are so important for the electro dragons. So electro dragons and their lightnings can jump for one tile, which means, for example, they can jump from this storage to this storage because there's only one tile different in between. Let's say, okay, they want to jump from this elixir storage to this air defense, which is not possible because there are two tiles in between, which means this lightning bounce is not possible. So you always have to keep that in mind, but at the same time you can use that against the electro dragons as well. For example, I pretty much defended this air defense against most of the bounces, except when the electro dragons come from this angle, which means if they're coming from this side, you can't really bounce this air defense. But at the same time, you sometimes want to have bounces in your base when they're, for example, activating the Giga Tesla. For example, on my base, we can zoom in over here. I'm using those builder huts, or this builder hut, to make sure that my town hall is getting activated earlier than the attacker wants it to get activated. For example, if someone's placing an electro dragon over here, that will be bounced from the gold mine to the dark elixir drill. And after that, there are 1, 2 tiles, 1, 2 tiles, 1, 2 tiles, which means the bounces will stop at this point, which means it's not really that much value. But at the same time, if someone is placing an electro dragon over here, let's do it in different color. So if someone's placing an electro dragon over here, it will bounce from the elixir collector to the cannon because there's only one tile. After that, there are 2 tiles. Over here, once again, 2 tiles. And then we have only one tile here, which means it will bounce to the wizard tower. Once again, 2, 3 tiles, 2 tiles. And now, once again, only one, which means it will bounce to the builder hut, and after that, to the town hall. Each lightning bolt of the electro dragon can attack or reach 5 buildings, which means we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buildings, which means the town hall is getting activated way too early because, well, before the electro dragons themselves will reach the town hall, because they have to be pretty much over here to actually kill the town hall. The CC will get lured. The air skeletons will come up. So there's a lot of stuff which has to get like into when you're defending against electro dragons. But the most important thing is on how to kind of path the lightnings through your base and how to actually place the outside buildings, because they're most of the time super important. Like I said, denying those bounces into your base. If you have those buildings touching the wall, you're not denying the bounces anymore, and that's super dangerous when you're trying to defend against electro dragons. Now again, if you have those high HP buildings, for example, like this expo over here, electro dragons can have like some super nice bounces over that, because if you rage them, they normally don't one-hit those buildings, which means they can attack them twice, which means they get 2 bounces from them. For example, like onto the air defense, onto the wizard tower. There are a couple of different options, and because of this, you have to be really careful when you're placing those buildings with high HP. For example, the expo, the eagle, the town hall itself, the CC, and for example, wizard towers. Storages, in my opinion, don't really belong into the base too often, except when you're trying to like stall a queen charge or whatever. But that's the main thing to take in consideration when you're trying to defend electro dragons. Okay, so let's go to the next one. You guys already noticed we will have this will be a longer video, but we want to talk about every single strategy or like troop, which is right now super popular, and how to defend them, or like at least one trick on how to make it more difficult to actually triple your base. The next one is the Hawk Rider, and that's a really strong troop because it got stronger and stronger in the last couple of patches, and now with a new level in the latest patches, it got super strong. There's so many mass Hawk Rider attacks out there, Kill Squad, Queen Charge Hawk, like so many Hawk Riders. And the key to defend them are obviously the spring traps. Even though you might think that the giant bombs are like the main thing, but the first priority is always the spring trap. So how to place spring traps. For example, this one is super bad. I don't know why I even placed it over there, but somehow I don't know. So never ever place something like this. You always want to have the spring traps between 2 defenses, but not like 2 defenses like this, because if you're placing your spring trap over here, so let's take this one because it's the same. There are 2 tiles in between, so those 2, which means you have 6 options to place your spring trap, because you can place it on every single tile. At the same time, the Hawk Riders have 6 options to choose where to stand, which means it's super hard to actually predict where the Hawk Riders will stand, or like a lot of testing. At the same time, it like depends whether they're coming from this angle or this angle. For placing spring traps, it's always the best if you have something like over here, where you have only 1 tile in between, which means now normally you have only 3 options. On this one I have only 2, so I have 2 options to choose from where to place the spring trap, and now I have to decide, okay, if the Hawk Riders are coming from this side, they will probably like go maybe over here and then over there, so this tile is better. If they're coming from over here, they will probably go like this. So you have to think about how the Hawk Riders might path, and then decide where to place the spring trap, and that's basically it for placing the spring traps. It's actually, you have to test a little bit on your own how to kind of spectate the Hawk Riders and their pathing, but as soon as you got that, it's kind of easy to place them. And like I said, super important to actually defend the Hawk Riders. At the same time, yes, it's always nice to have good giant bombs in there, but most of the time it's a bit more targeting the armies like Pekkas Smash to get rid of the bowlers. But at the same time, you can place them against Hawk Riders. For example, you try to not always place them around Inferno Towers, because they're not like nearly everyone is healing around Inferno Towers, even though if there are no traps. So everyone would heal over here and everyone would heal over here, which means you have to create pretty much areas where they have to heal as well in between. For example, over here, then with this giant bomb, etc. So you have to kind of make them waste their heal spells to have in the end less heals, if that makes sense. So that's like the second key to defend Hawk Riders, but mainly the spring traps. The next one is going to be Lalo, which means it's a bit more difficult to actually try to build against that. But first off, we have the lava hounds, and this is getting a little bit complicated because we have two options. First off, it's the safe option pretty much. Always just place your black mice next to air defenses like over here, because that's where, like, every time if there's a hound, it will fly to air defense, which means they will get hit by the black mine anyway. So place it next to an air defense, which is always a safe option. But at the same time, if you want to improve your base building, what is pretty much a skill and like the key to predict, you want to have the black mines into the path of the hound. Because if you do this, you can place the black mines a little bit further on the outside to actually try to defend something like queen charges or even pekkas mesh, and we come to this later. But for example, this black mine, most of the people are coming in with the Lalo from this side, kinda. Which means if they're doing this, they will come into the first air defense over here, getting the first black mine, then pathing over here, getting the second black mine, and then the hounds will path over here, and they have one hound coming from this direction to actually try to soak up red bombs, for example. So we have a black mine over there, but if someone is doing a queen walk, for example, like from this side, this black mine will will eventually catch a healer as well. And this means we have like one black mine which is defending multiple armies, which is always the key when you're trying to place your traps. And that's where it's getting difficult, because you actually have to predict where the hounds are getting placed. And that's super hard, but well, it's possible. But like I said, that's kind of like the high skill cap of base building when it comes down to placing the black mines. But this is later the important thing on how to defend the lava hounds. The next thing, obviously, on trying to defend Lalo is place your air defenses not too far on the inside, because if you're doing that, they can tank a lot of stuff. For example, if a hound is over here, it tanks this defense, this defense, this defense, this defense, even I think this one, and the enemy queen might be even this one. So there are a lot of stuff onto the hound, which means it has like the most value it can actually have. So try to place the air defense a little bit more on the outside, because if you're placing it over here, the hound can tank pretty much those two and one Inferno Beam maybe, which means it's not that much value. Pretty much the same over here, which means all those defenses in between cannot be tanked by the lava hounds, which is super important if you're trying to defend against Lalo, and that's already the key to defend against loons as well. But what we want to talk about as well are the red bombs, because the red bombs are obviously the counter to the loons. And now we have to actually check out the ranges of the air defenses, because if you check out the range, that's normally the range where the lava pups are like getting spread out as soon as the hound is popping, which means you don't want to have any red bombs or even the tornado trap inside of this. It's a little bit low, like smaller than the actual radius, but you can take this like as the kind of thing where you don't want to have any of your traps, at least not close to the air defense. That's another really important thing. And I would say let's get to the next troop. Next one is going to be the miners, and miners obviously are kind of similar to the hawk riders, so we don't want to talk about once again the spring traps. So we're talking about the skeleton traps, because if your base is weak against miners, then you should just use your skeleton traps on ground next to something which is doing a lot of AoE damage, like for example the Inferno Tower, the Town Hall, and other stuff. So what is an option? Let's take a look at over here. You want to have the skeleton trap coming up as soon as the town is activated. For example, if I switch this trap to ground, it's not really working too well, because the trap will get triggered if your miners are over here, which isn't the best thing. You want to have it triggered when the miners attack the town hall, and then it's getting triggered. For example, if you place it over here, the radius, it won't get triggered over here, won't get triggered over here, here, or here, which means as soon as they're attacking the town hall, then it's getting triggered, then the skeletons are coming up, the town hall is activated, and then the skeletons can distract the miners while the town hall is shooting at them, and this is super annoying as an attacker. and that's how you get the most value out of your skeleton traps. So that's another thing to keep in mind. On this one, I try to mainly defend against stuff like electro dragons or other air armies like Lalo. So that's why I have my skeleton traps on air. So the next one's going to be Pekka Smash, and this is going to be a tricky one because you have two options to defend Pekka Smash. The first one is a bit difficult to understand and to explain, and that's pathing. I can't really explain that because that's kind of experience when it comes down to base building, but what I can explain to you guys is how to attack Pekka Smash the second way, and that's pretty much to get rid of the healers. So if you're getting rid of the healers, then the Pekkas will die really quickly, because even though they're kind of beefy, the main thing why the strategy is working are the healers. That's like the core of this army. And this means if you have like an entry, which is like one of the most used, for example, for me it was the left side, place black mines over there. So you want to combine the information I gave you for the lava hound and for the Pekka Smash, which means, for example, this black mine will get triggered if a lava hound is flying over it, which means this black mine has value in that sense. At the same time, a lot of people are coming in over here from this side with Pekka Smash, which means those three black mines are getting triggered by healers, which means it's already 3 healers left, like 3 healers gone, and maybe even more when he's not careful with the air defenses. So the next thing about that is that you're trying to have air defense that's spots where the attacker cannot reach it. For example, if someone's doing a queen walk like this air defense will be pain. So try to defend the Pekka Smash with attacking the healers, and that's, I think, the easiest way on how to do that, because like I said, the pathing way is a bit more about experience and how to predict the pathing and the entries of the attacker. So let's get to the next one, and that is going to be suey, which means you try to get as much value as possible with your heroes, and that's all about trying to defend, for example, on this side with small bombs, and that's super important to place them correctly. Let's take a deeper look over here. So most of the guys are attacking this base from this angle, which means they're trying to funnel with their king and then trying to wall break in over here. That's why there's a spring trap, that's why there's a small bomb, trying to make sure that it's as hard as possible. The guys have to use a test wall breaker, and if you kind of forget it, then you're screwed. So that's how trying to defend the suey attack. If you know, okay, this could be weak to like on this spot, a lot of value can be taken down by the heroes, then it's try to defend that with the small bombs, so that's really hard for the attacker to actually get that. And if it's super obvious that someone's coming from over there, don't place any additional traps over there, which means, for example, black mines, red bombs, because on this entry, even though a lot of people did that, and even I tried to defend that with the spring trap and the small bomb, a lot of people still managed to get through the wall, which means they get the air defense, they get the Inferno Tower, and that's basically it. But there are no traps inside. This black mine is getting triggered even though, like, as long as those two are still standing, which means it's not wasted. So that's how you try to defend against those suey attacks. It's a bit more difficult because not that many players are doing this at a casual level. So I don't know whether you actually have to consider trying to defend that too much. The next one and the last one is going to the bed spell, and that is completely based on AoE damage defenses. For example, Inferno Tower, Wizard Tower, Inferno Tower, Wizard Tower, etc. So you have to take a look at those. What you don't want to have is, like over here, 2 defenses really close to each other, because you can freeze 2 defenses at the same time, which means it's super much value for the attacker if they're using bats. But at the same time, for example, those 2, they have to spend 2 free spells to actually get bats through this area, which makes it super difficult. The same thing over here. We have 3 defenses which are super hard to get through for bat spells. And this means, for example, if they're coming from over here, you have to freeze the first wizard tower, then you have to freeze the inferno tower, and you can't freeze at the same time this wizard tower, which means you have to freeze it as well after that. Those are 3 freeze spells, and since there are so many Tesla, etc. over here, you probably need to have 4, because you need to freeze this inferno tower twice. So this is kind of the key on how to defend the bat spell. Place your wizard towers really carefully, and make sure that you can't freeze it with something else together, like the inferno tower or other wizard towers. That's pretty much the key on how to defend those bad spells. At the same time, which is kind of like came new into the meta, is if it's possible, try to make sure that the wizard tower can't be tanked by an ice golem. For example, on this one, if I click on it, if someone is placing a ice golem over here, he won't need a freeze spell, which means, for our example, let's do it like this. He can freeze over here, place bats over there, tank this wizard tower, and that's basically it. Of course, he has to be careful with this inferno tower, but he can take out this corner already with only 1 freeze. So that's something to keep in mind. And be super careful with your wizard towers. They're way more important than you might think. And that's basically it for trying to defend the bat spell. I hope you guys learned something today. And like maybe you noticed already, but base building is a super tough topic. I will probably do more videos on that. But at the same time, this video is already above 20 minutes. So, and we touched on we kind of went into the direction of base building, not even deep or anything. We kind of only went into the direction, which is really hard to explain everything. So I hope you guys learned something, or like you could take something with you to build bases on your own. If you're too lazy, take this base, try it on your own. Maybe you don't like a couple of areas of this base. Try to build a new base around that. For example, if you like this part, keep it and try to build the rest new, etc. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. We will see you guys, or I will see you guys in the next one. And thank you so much. See you guys.